Hi, Dicken. Can you hear me?
I can
Am
hear
I
you
muted?
clearly. Yeah,
Good. Well, welcome. And thank you so much for participating in this free webinar series. It's really grateful to have you here tonight at Pacific time. And it's also, I'm really thrilled to have you in the 6-month program in Santa Monica in the fall. I feel very blessed that you're going to be kicking us off. So thank you. And Dicken, you were the first three principles teacher that I worked with who'd studied with Sydney Banks. So you really introduced me to the understanding in a really profound way. And I can't remember when you told me, but it's always stuck in my head that when you first started working with me, I looked like a deer in headlights. And the proof in the pudding is that at the end, I didn't quite look the same way.
good before and after.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And Angus will tell you that I still do look like that sometimes, but a whole lot less often. And the other thing that was really the reason that I wanted to work with you is that Claire Schutz had said to me, you know, you really need to talk to Dicken. And one of the things when I did speak with you, you said that you love speaking about the spiritual nature of the principles. Like that's just a conversation that you love. And that's a conversation that is very close to my heart. And I'm really grateful that you're open to speaking more about that today.
that's my favorite.
So we'll just have some time where, you know, you can really take the call wherever you'd like to go, and we'll have a conversation back and forth. And then at some point when it feels right, we'll open it up for questions and go from there. Does that sound good?
Sounds good. I just want to say first off, as I look through the faces, I am just filled with such beautiful feelings, seeing so many familiar faces and seeing so many friends-to-be faces. Thank you, all of you, for coming at whatever hour you happen to be living in. Even those of you who are resting in bed, I think that's very cool. It's a good place to listen to a webinar. Wow. So, Rohini, I mean, first of all, I'm thrilled to be part of the series that you're doing. All of the people that are going to be doing weekends are people that I have spent enormous amounts of time with. They're very, very dear friends. And boy, I just know that that's going to be an extremely powerful and impactful series if people are inclined to do that. So I just wanted to say that. Just a delightful group of people with a lot of time reflecting on deeper spiritual truth. So Rohini, any place at all you would like me to start, or does it matter? Or
I mean, I really trust you, but what part of the focus of this series and the 6-month program is to really speak about the principles from the benefit of having worked directly with Sydney Banks. And, you know, since he's no longer here, I never got the opportunity to meet him, to study with him, to learn directly from him. And I think that the people that did get to do that, there's a level of understanding of this that is profound and impactful. So really that's one of my curiosities. If there's anything you'd like to share about how it was working with him, studying with him, what really, how that impacted you.
Well, I was very fortunate to have been able to spend quite a bit of time with him for 23 years. And I'm grateful, not just to Sid, but to where he pointed me inside each of us that awakened such love and such understanding. And you know, I've been a seeker. I was a seeker my whole life, always looking for something that would bring more love into my life. Even though I had a lot of love, it's the only thing I was interested in. I think that was the only thing I asked Sid. He must have gotten tired of me asking. Sid, could you say some more about love? And you know what? He answered that differently every time, depending on where I was asking from. Sometimes he'd talk about it as a feeling. Sometimes he'd say, no, it's Dicken, it's not a feeling. Because I was getting too attached to the idea of feeling, right? So I liked best when he talked about, for any one of us, if we discover the essence of the principles, if we get just a moment's taste of what he called pure thought, pure consciousness, or pure mind, we would know exactly what unconditional love is, what divine love is. Divine love includes the personal. It's not other than or separate than the personal. What we tend to think of as love. By the time I met Sid Banks, I'd been practicing for 10 years as a psychologist, and I collected techniques. I read every book on what could help you become more loving, more compassionate, more awake, more alive. Every book that I read in the psychology section and in the spiritual section and the religion sections of bookstores, every book I read had a last chapter that told you what to do. Techniques, steps, practices. So I had tried them all because I had been told by some of the wisest people that I had come across that that's necessary to develop your well-being and your capacity for love. So it was basically, everything was a self-development tool, basically saying you don't yet have fully developed what you're looking for, and you're going to have to work really hard for many years. So I meditated 20 years on a regular basis. By the time I met Sid, I was doing 4 hours a day. I did dream work, trained myself to wake up at the end of every REM sleep during the night and would write down 5 glorious dreams to work on the next day. Affirmation books, cognitive notebooks where I would challenge and reframe my thinking content. Structured journals, unstructured journals. Oh, you name it. And I did every kind of therapy that you could do, I think, including some therapies that took place in padded rooms, so they were soundproofed, so you could scream as loud as you want and get those nasty feelings out of you. I tried everything by the time I met Sid Banks. And the first time I heard him talk, I had so much thinking on my mind, I didn't really get very much out of what he was saying. Other than, when I looked at him, he was the most ordinary, down-to-earth person I had seen. But his eyes had an amazing depth to them. And most people that had the opportunity to be in his presence could tangibly feel his presence And you look in his eyes and you couldn't help but to say, this guy knows something. He's on to something. And when he would talk and his eyes would twinkle and sparkle, and that was the first thing I noticed. Later on, I found out that looking in that direction was no different than looking for something in a technique or in a book or in a teacher or in a workshop or a seminar, and thinking that I was going to find my answer outside of myself. The second time I went and listened to Sid Banks, which I would recommend to anybody, there's tons of beautiful tapes available. As I sat there quietly, all of that thinking I had began to fall away. And it was both ordinary and extremely sacred. Now, what do I mean by sacred? Well, earlier I heard Wendy talking about walking around Salt Spring and everything was brighter and more beautiful. And well, every time I hit that space, I feel like everything in the world, no matter where I am, on a subway in New York City, walking through a slum in Lima, Peru, or sitting here looking out at the ocean and the 100-foot pine trees. There's a beauty that can be seen when you look from that space. And I began to like the metaphor of sort of falling out of my intellect, which I prized, which there's nothing wrong with an intellect, but when you live in it exclusively, it becomes a very limited world, and there's always a sense of lack, and it always will lead to a search for something better, better feeling, better life, more love, more. It's a search. During that second time, what I heard was that every single one of us, no exception, already has perfect well-being at their core, perfect mental health. There is absolutely nothing lacking in any one of us at any moment. Now, I had heard other people talking about inside of us, deep down, we have a spiritual heart, we have love and understanding, but there was something about the conviction with which Sid spoke that I really, for a second, fell out of my personal thinking. And I knew in an instant when I stepped into that space that what he was saying about innate mental health was true. And it blew me away. That's what Sid would call an insight. It has nothing to do with words. It has to do with stepping within, which means beyond your personal thinking, beyond your conceptual mind, into the quiet that's always there, and resting in that silence where there are no ideas of self or other or good or bad, or later on, there's no time, no past, no future. There's just now. Not as a concept, not as an idea, but as an experience of just ease, peace, connection, aliveness, presence, openness. A little taste of our true nature. A little taste of what everyone's true self is. And when I went home after that, trying to do anything to gain a better experience made absolutely no sense to me. And I threw away all of my journals. I threw away 13 bags of books. I took another whole load of books out to the Dempsey dumpster at night and covered them up, because back in the 70s, they had this notion you had negative feelings inside you, and the role of health was to get in touch with your worst feelings and to express them. All of those books made zero sense. And I took those out and threw them in a dumpster and covered them over so that no one would ever have to go through looking in that direction for well-being. The other insight was that, in part because the way it happened for Sid Banks was that he wasn't reading spiritual books, he wasn't practicing, he didn't have a spiritual teacher, he didn't meditate, he didn't read psychology books, he didn't. Later on, he used to joke that he wrote more books than he had read in his whole life. Right? He left school at the end of 9th grade because he was so poor and had to work to help his family get by. Right? And he had an extremely rare event where he had a spontaneous enlightenment experience. But you know, after all these years of reflecting on Sid's teaching, enlightenment is nothing more than a recognition of our true self that can only happen when we have escaped the limitations and confines and judgments of our conceptual mind. And in those moments, we taste that in that moment, life is perfect as it is. No matter what you're feeling, no matter what mood you're in, no matter what's happening in your life, at that moment, without judgments, without shoulds, without have-tos, without limiting beliefs, and every belief is a limitation. When we are free of that sense of limitation, something wakes up in us and resonates that that's truth, that that's our true self, that there's nowhere to go to get that, nothing to do to earn it or deserve it, no steps that you have to go through before you, no pre-admission, no requirement. Now listen, after being a psychologist for 10 years and studying spiritual teachings and going to spiritual teachers and having long-standing meditation practices and having read and studied the mystics from every single religion, I never heard anybody say, there's nothing to do, nothing to get, nothing to gain. You already have perfect well-being in every moment. And but for your thinking, you would experience enlightenment. And it's no big deal. And it's ordinary. And it's available to every one of us. Every single one of us. And it's never what you think it is. If you think you know what enlightenment is, I guarantee you it's not it. Right. Couple of stories about the way I was affected by Sid's teaching. After 4 years of studying, learning about the principles, and I was a psychologist in private practice, had an extremely successful private practice, had 30 clients and a very long waiting list, and I worked with people from 6 months to 2 years. because it takes a long time to change, you know. It took you a long time to get messed up, and it's going to take me a long time to unravel all that mess with you. So, you know, make yourself at home because you're going to be around for a long time. Well, how powerful it was for me to see that it doesn't take time to gain your well-being because you already have it. You already are it. It just takes a moment of recognition, an insight, a stepping within, and then seeing life in an ordinary but sacred way from just the deep presence of the now, of this moment, not this moment, of the now as it is. Nothing to fix, nothing wrong. It's powerful. I had never heard anybody in all my years say that with such certainty and such confidence. So he calls me up. After 4 years, I was listening to Sid give a talk at Mills College in California. And again, there's nothing mysterious or mystical about any of this. All of us have the capacity to just temporarily disengage from our intellect and relax into the now. To fall, to come back home, to come back to the place where we're at most peace and most comfortable in ourselves as we are, right? And one time after listening to Sid, I fell so deeply into that space. And sometimes this happens for people. I could not stop laughing for hours. Some people call that you finally got the cosmic joke. You are what you see. You are an enlightened being already, but for your thinking that says you're not. In that moment, without thinking about it, I knew I would open the first 3P center in the Northeast of the United States. There was no question in my mind. I didn't even have to think about it. It was just a done deal. It was a certainty. And I'm flying home on the plane, and I was sitting next to a friend of mine, and she had also had a very powerful experience, insight, falling within from listening to Sid, and it had occurred to her to do the same thing. And neither of us blinked an eye. We said, let's do it together. There was no thought, no discussion. It was just, again, a certainty, a knowing. Sid says when we touch that space, there's a feeling of well-being, and there's a knowing, wisdom, a knowing. It has nothing to do with the intellect. It's just a certainty, a knowing, just knowing what makes sense, knowing what step to take, knowing what to do, without your intellect having to know how or in what way. And I came back to my friends who I had this private practice with and had been with for 13 years and loved them to pieces, and we had all vowed we'd die working together at that center. It was very successful center, wonderful, beautiful people. And I walked into them and said, I realized something. I realized I need to leave our group and start a center to share what I've been learning. And there was such clarity and certainty that I had about that, that not a single one of them batted an eye. And they said, we're very happy for you. 2 weeks later, I was in a new building, a new office with a new partner. And we opened the Vermont Center for Human Understanding. And we did nothing but do the best we could to point people toward the principles. So I'm sitting in my office at the Vermont Center of Human Understanding right after we had opened, and I get a phone call and I answered it, and it's Sid. So how's the weather there in Vermont? I said, Sid, well, actually, it's a pretty nice day today. And how's the weather there on Salt Spring? Well, it's pretty nice here too, you know, it's got a nice breeze. And we talked about the weather for a while. And then he, in typical fashion, he started in. And this was something, this is a way in which Sid often would teach one-on-one. At a certain point, he would just say something like, Dicken, you have to take people beyond the psychological to the spiritual. I said, yes, I know, Sid. He said, no, Dicken. No, Dicken. It's sort of like, okay, I want you to just stop referring to what you think you already know and listen. Dicken, you have to take people beyond the psychological to the spiritual. And now I paused as I was reflecting and I said, Sid, so true. And he goes, no, Dicken, you have to take people beyond the psychological to the spiritual. At that point, I said, maybe I don't know what he means. And then he said it again. And then I said, I'm certain I don't know what he means. And then he said it again. And he probably said it to me 10 times until I really had fallen out of everything I thought I knew about psychological and spiritual. He wanted me to experience what he was talking about, not talk about what he was talking about, not think about what he was talking about, not agree conceptually with what he was talking about. He wanted me to experience going beyond the psychological to the spiritual. And then he said, well, good talking to you, Dicken. Goodbye. I sat in stunned silence for a very long time. And I started to connect the dots. That when I listened to Sid Banks, it was not Sid affecting me. It was Sid pointing me toward a space that's inside me and everyone, where concepts and ideas no longer govern the day, where our true self is presence, silent awareness, silence and a feeling. When Sid would say, look for a feeling, he was not really pointing us toward a specific feeling that has already taken place. He said, one time he said to me, Dicken, there is no word in the English language, now he would say in any language, that can describe that feeling. Because it's the feeling you're in when you're beyond all concepts. The feeling that babies are in when they're in deep presence and they don't have any words for any of it. But they know it. They know it. It's what's always there within all human beings at core. There were so many times, so connecting the dots, just started seeing ordinary times in my life, and I started seeing it in my clients, and I started seeing it in everybody, times when we just fall out of our conceptual state of mind and experience deep gratitude. Oh, I'm so happy I live where I live. Or having just a little glimpse of that space. Or you see your child or your grandkids do something that's so adorable, and you go, oh, it's another taste of essence, of presence, of our true self. As soon as you start thinking about it, you lose it. You can't think your way to happiness. Sid would say this over and over again. It's not a matter of figuring this out. No one has been able to think their way to happiness. And the paradox, when we fall out of our personal thinking, it reveals itself to us as ordinary presence that opens, that expands, that's where we feel more connected, more alive, more awake. We begin to see through those eyes where the filter of our personal thinking has fallen away. We see with great clarity. Sid says, when you're in your personal mind and you're in your ideas about life, it's like looking through a glass that somebody has put lots and lots of scratches on, and you just can't see very clearly. None of us can when we're caught up in our ideas about ourselves and life and what we should do and how we should be and how other people should be and blah, 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 blah. Right? And then he says, when we fall out of personal thought and our personal mind goes to sleep, you're looking at life as it is, no scratches, no distortion. He called it going from the contaminated conceptual personal mind to pure thought. Just means free of conceptual contamination. Pure thought, pure consciousness, awareness, free of distortion of any idea. And in those moments, our true nature reveals itself as peace, as love, as joy, as connection, as perspective, clarity, common sense, inspiration, aspiration, motivation, whatever is helpful to us in that moment, given where we are, who we are, and what circumstance we're in, because wisdom is such a responsive intelligence that will bring you exactly what you need in any moment. And I found this true even when I have been in what I might call hellish circumstances, life-threatening circumstances, dangerous circumstances, fearful circumstances where stakes were high. And wisdom is always there within us, in this space, in our presence, in the now. And often that's the last place we look for it. At least that was true for me. So it's a beautiful message. It's very simple. I talked with somebody today and they kept saying, oh, Dicken, I've just started studying 3Ps and I get it, but it's very complicated. And I'm not sure yet what to do. Can you tell me what to do? And I could totally relate. That was me. My bumper sticker of life was, tell me what to do and I'll do it. If you think this can help me gain more well-being.
That's beautiful, Dicken. And I love how you've pointed to the fact that that essence is who we all are, that it is equal, there's no less or more, it's the same. And the ordinariness of how it shows up in our lives, as well as the extraordinary experiences that we can have with it, but that it's there in those moments, like you said, when you're like, oh, I'm so grateful, or, you know, you give someone a hug, that's dropping out of our conceptual mind into the feeling of who we really are. And that essence is practical, like you're pointing to the wisdom in that, there for us day in, day out, each moment.
I love that word, practical, ordinary, practical, present, available, now, no exceptions. Wisdom is our back. It's not wisdom has our back. I used to say wisdom has my back. Wisdom is our back. Wisdom is the intelligence of life waiting to break through into human consciousness when we get our precious little egos out of the way, just for a moment. And then it happens, but often people haven't realized or had insight that that's it. That's what they're looking for. Often when I work with clients, I'll point out to them their well-being and they'll be shocked at how ordinary it is. Right? Even something as dramatic as when I was working with an extremely depressed woman, and in no time in our session, we were just both laughing our heads off. And I just gently said to her, right now, you're not depressed, are you? And she says, oh, yes. It's understandable because we're not used to thinking that the instant the clouds part, the sun is always there. And when it breaks through, that's the light that everybody is looking for. When they say, go to the light, become enlightened, lighten up. That's it. We say, oh no, it can't be that easy. That's what I've said for years. This can't be this easy. Can't be this easy. And often clients will say in no time, I can't believe how easy this is. Now, when I read Sid Banks, it seems like he's pointing toward one space inside of every human being that when we touch that space, you will know what knowing is, what wisdom is, what infinity means, not as a concept, but as a vastness with no boundaries. You'll know what unconditional means without even understanding it intellectually. When Sid had his enlightenment experience, he turned around and said to his wife, Pat, I've come home. I've transcended the boundaries of time, space, and matter. And he said later he had to look up what the word transcend meant. Dictionary definition, what it means, but he knew what transcendence was. To be be in this world, but not of it. To be the wave and the ocean simultaneously. To be the individual and the universal. To be the personal self and the spiritual. Simultaneous. We're human beings, and it's all one. It's all the same energy. Spiritual energy is what dances into form to create the trees and the birds. And my wife were just sitting outside. My wife and I were sitting outside having dinner tonight, and the birds were just singing and singing and singing. And it's just temporary condensation of this spiritual divine energy. It's all dancing sea foam on the ocean of consciousness. It's all life delighting in itself, delighting, reflecting light back to itself so it can be experienced and seen.
That's so poetic. It's just in this space. I love that we can be together in this space with all these people and kind of drop into that. It's just amazing. And thank you for sharing in that way.
Yes, yes.
So I noticed that some people are raising their hands. You want to take some questions? So I'll just let
yes,
everybody,
perfect.
Yeah,
perfect.
I'll let everybody know.
Or comments, questions or comments.
Yeah, comments, yeah. So in terms of, if you click on the participants button, there'll be a raise hand button. And if you click on that, then I'll be able to see that your hand is raised. And the first person who has her hand raised is Wendy Williams. So I'm just going to unmute you, Wendy. Oh, hang on. Are you unmuted, Wendy? There you go. There you are.
Yes, thank you very much. What came to mind for me is, thank you, first of all, Dicken, for sharing that personal firsthand experience. Is just wonderful to absorb and listen to, and with Sid. And what comes to mind is how you express it really resonates for my own internal understanding, or my own glimpses of coming home. And it stands in somewhat of a contrast to things that I'm hearing or reading frequently on the internet, you know, in groups where 3P folks are. And specifically what I mean is, I love how you express coming home to yourself, dropping into that inner knowing. And what I'm hearing or reading more frequently, to me, my eyes, maybe it's always been there, is this notion that there is no self, there is no Wendy. Now, I understand, or I sort of understand, with my limited capacity, the oneness, the personal self, and the universal self. This notion that seems to be out there in the ether of there really is no self seems to go a step beyond. And I'm just curious if that is something that you experienced or heard from Sid first. And the second thing is that I want to just get out before I forget, is that I had the experience of being at Salt Spring Island in June, and you and I were both students with Elsie and Chip. And I just want to say my experience of being around you and with you is such integrity of how you speak on every webinar I've ever recorded or live, and how you were, because I saw and I experienced how you would take time on that back porch and cross your leg and sit and look off. And I could, what do I know? It felt like you were dropping in and getting quiet. And there were 30, 40 people around. And if anybody came up to you and said, hello, I want to talk to you, you were kind and of course turned to them and spoke and connected. But your ability seems to me, on a very regular basis, to just drop in and get quiet was a beautiful thing to see. So I just wanted to say that before I forgot. But my question about that, there is no self, is jarring to me. So thank you.
Yeah. The truth to the fact that there's no self is half the equation. And whenever you make preference of one half of the equation, we're just human or we're just being. We're individual beings or we're one being. As soon as you get attached to the idea of one or the other, you're going to miss the whole. So I've come to love the chapter in Sid's book, Missing Link, Beyond Duality. It's
Thank you.
phenomenal. It's
Thank
now my favorite chapter of seeing life in the singular rather than dualistically. Self and no self are ways of expressing something, but there's something beyond those ways of expressing that's true. And I love how ordinary this can be. It's my experience, and when I work with people, of having the honor to be able to be present while someone experiences their individuality and their universality simultaneously as a whole. You must see in the singular, Sid would say. It's formless and form together. Look for the connection, the already present unity between those two seemingly disparate worlds. He has given talks like the best of two worlds. Right? Where you can celebrate your absolute humanity and experience horror about what's happening in the world and simultaneously experience freedom and peace and love and connection and not have it be a paradox or a polarity. That both are part of the whole. So you can have an ocean that's very turbulent on the surface, very calm a foot deeper, and completely still at a greater depth. Now, these are metaphors, but as I learned from Sid, one time he did a talk where he did nothing but say everything that's said about the principles is a metaphor. Not a single thing anybody says about the principles is truth. Any idea or concept people express has nothing to do with truth. The only way you can experience truth, he'd say this over again, it's right here for you, is to go beyond all concepts. And then you can experience for yourself the unity of life, the wholeness of life. And we can become like, in a sense, like little children again, before they develop a conceptual mind. We can experience life as a playground. Even though we have thoughts and feelings and experience, I experience stress and upset and confusion, and they're just flowing in and out as on the surface of the ocean. But less and less is it seen as, well, that's not my essence, right? That's just a wave on the ocean is an integral part of the ocean, but it's not the essence of what an ocean is.
Right.
It's not the whole.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Just the word beyond duality is so comforting, so resonates more deeply than non-duality.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Whatever.
Yeah.
I love how you just trust what's resonating and keep going in that direction. It's beautiful, Wendy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you. All right, I'm going to go to the next person is Diane. So let me just go ahead and unmute you, Diane. Hi, Diane. Oh, sorry, my unmute button isn't working very well. Can you unmute yourself, Diane?
Yes, I
There,
just
thank
did.
you.
Hi, everybody.
Okay.
Hi, Dicken. I've been wanting to meet you for a long time.
Well, I've certainly loved your Facebook posts. On some level, we met.
Yeah. I think the first time I recognized the truth of myself in you through the place you were coming from is when you had a conversation with Angus Jane, and you talked about the well-being of and before I have a question, but I was touched by what you said now, that when you described Sid, you said there was something in his eyes, there was a twinkle in his eyes. This guy's onto something, he knows something. I haven't had the fortune of meeting Sid, but I have the fortune of meeting you, and I think that you have this twinkle. And your laughter, and I mean, at one time, I was listening to you talk, and I fast forwarded you, and you were laughing. Oh, you were hilarious. You were absolutely hilarious. So thank you. I really feel your true nature. I feel your true essence. And obviously then I recognize myself in it.
Yes, yes.
So I want to talk about the plight of the Mexican children and the parents, and appreciate, how do I word this? I'm not giving it much attention. Not because I don't care, because I do care. I just know that me being unhappy or sad or is not going to help them. But how does wisdom and protect these children from being? I mean, it seems to me that there will be some sort of impact when kids are separated from their parents, and the parents are separated from their children. That inadvertently something is taking shape. They are experiencing some sort of suffering. I'm not sure if I'm being clear, but I'd like to address this in the grand scheme of things, because the innate well-being is intact. That nobody can touch that.
Yes. I know that to be true, Diane. I know that to be true because for a long time I thought I was wounded and damaged, and I've worked with people that everybody in the psychology and psychiatry and psychology profession would call damaged goods. And I've now worked with people like that, and there is absolutely no damage within, what Sid meant by within. And when they touch that, their well-being, their eyes sparkle. And they begin to fill with love and wisdom, no exception. And fill is sort of the wrong word because it's already there. It's just, in a sense, we take the cover off of our knowing, and people experience laughter and love and well-being, and it's right there, thought away, always, no matter how much abuse people have been through in their life, no matter how depressed they've been in their life, no matter how long they've been unhappy in their life. When people begin to realize that their well-being has been untouched, and that now the only thing that creates suffering now, what happened was horrible, it's horrific, it just boggles the mind how people can treat each other that way. And when people discover that their innate well-being is intact, and they begin to see the role thought plays in either uncovering or covering our true self, the first thing they experience is hope. Hope. Hope brings so much healing to people. Hope that they can lead ordinary lives. Hope that they can have happiness and love in their life, no matter how much or how little they received when they were growing up. They begin to see that the only thing right now that creates psychological suffering is when we get caught up in painful memories and think they're true. So as people's understanding of the principles deepen, their relationship to painful memories changes completely. And they're just thoughts that come and go rather than something that has damaged me or wounded me. They're just thoughts that come and go like any other thought. And I've never met a person ever who doesn't have extremely painful memories stored somewhere in their mind. And at times they get activated and they create very painful feelings. And if you understand the nature of it, it doesn't frighten you in the least when you freak out, or it's just thought in the moment coming through. It's not the past. It's not your personality. It has nothing to do with the past now. There is no past. There is no future. In truth. But everybody does bring memories from the past into this moment of their life, and at times that they'll be activated. That's normal. It doesn't mean something is wrong with someone psychologically because they have memories. And as people's understanding of thought deepens, they don't take those thoughts to be truth. It's just a feeling like any other feeling that comes and goes. It's not who we are. More and more people identify who I am as what doesn't come and go. My thoughts come and go. My feelings come and go. My experience of my body comes and goes. But who I am is here, aware of that, feeling that, knowing that. And that's our true nature. Pure awareness. Knowing. Love, wisdom, understanding. Mind, consciousness, and thought.
Thank you, Diane.
Thank you, Dicken.
Thank you, Diane. No, that's a beautiful, beautiful question. Can I say one more thing about this that has been helpful? It used to be when I would watch the news, I would get so troubled and so upset and the only thing I could do is watch it a little bit and then not watch it. Watch it and then not watch it. Now something different has been happening for the last few years. Whenever I see something absolutely horrific in the world, I right away fall out of all of my thinking. It's the only response to horror that I think is valuable in my experience. I fall out of my thinking. I in a sense, metaphorically, I run as fast as I can to that space. Because what I've learned is that when people touch that space, they literally bring more consciousness into the world. They literally are bringing more love and understanding into the world. And We're all connected. It's one big ecosystem. So as you bring more love into the world, more kindness, more love, you can do that sitting in your room. You can do that lying in bed. You can do that walking down the street. You can literally be bringing more love and understanding. And that shift in consciousness is affecting the consciousness of humanity. And it's a way in which all of us can participate in helping to create a healthier world. And often then too, in those moments when you touch that space, you may get motivated to do something specific in the world that has an impact on that level of the world. I was in Peru. I lived in the slums with a family. I saw what it was like. Well, one of the daughters of the family was a nurse midwife, and that was a big deal for her to carry on and get her training to be a nurse midwife. And she had delivered at the age of like 18, she had delivered all these babies. And one night she patched up somebody who was bleeding to death, and it turned out he was a gorilla, and they thought she was a gorilla. And they came looking for her, and an amazing story of how she got away, but had to live underground. And so I spent a week with her and her family. And I saw firsthand what it was like to live at any moment thinking you're going to die. And when I came home, in my quiet moments, I suddenly found myself volunteering to head up a group that provided sanctuary for refugees who were fleeing their countries for fear of their life. And I did that for years. And then I got inspired to work with the Tibetan people from Tibet who had been misplaced from their country, and worked for years with the Tibetan Resettlement Project. So you touch that space and you feel better, but don't ever think that's avoiding or denying what's going on in the world. You are literally bringing more kindness and love into the world, more understanding. What a beautiful response that is to seeing something horrible on TV or in your life. What a beautiful that response is when you have a memory of the past that is painful and horrible, is to, in a sense, run toward the space where you literally are helping to raise the level of consciousness of humanity. And then see where wisdom guides you. See how it leads you toward random acts of kindness, being of service to your community, to your family. Just happens. It's built into us to move in that direction. It wouldn't be called wisdom if it didn't move each individual's soul toward thriving and recognizing more and more deeply our connection to the universal whole, to the whole family of humanity.
Thank you so much, Dicken. And I know that we're at time, and I really want to respect.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if we had an hour and a half. So great.
Well, I'm sure there are people with questions. Do you want to stay a little? Are you open to staying a little longer, or?
Yeah, I could stay a little bit longer. Maybe we could do one more question. If people need to leave, they can leave. And
all right then. So the next person who has their hand raised is Arvin.
Oh, hi, Arvin.
Hi, Arvin. Can you?
Oh,
there we go. There you are.
Okay. Hi, Dicken.
Hi, Arvin.
I haven't been talking to you for a very long time.
I know. It's great to see you. You're looking good, man.
Yeah, I love the talk. It was very spiritual. So my question is, you mentioned that Sid told you to take people to spiritual.
Yes.
I am wondering how are you doing that while you are talking?
While I am.
No, while you are talking, you want people to I would say feel the spiritual nature of what you are talking about, right? So what is your steps or process or what while you are talking to them to take them to that path instead of psychology or like very science based?
When people come to see me,
Mm-hmm.
I listen very deeply with as little on my mind as I can
Mm-hmm.
until I get a sense about what's most relevant for that person.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So we've sort of narrowed in on, because I want to be responsive to what's most relevant to the person I'm talking to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a different kind of listening than I used to do. I'm not listening for information. I'm listening until I feel a real heartfelt connection with that person and what they think they're looking for.
Mm.
Right? It's a intuition, a feeling, a sense of connecting. You know, you've had talks with people, Arvind, where you haven't felt connected with somebody, and then other talks where you feel, oh my God, we could talk forever.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, it's that simple. I wait until I have that feeling.
Huh.
And then I have no clue what to say or what to share with that person until it occurs to me fresh. So I keep listening and talking and asking questions until something occurs to me. It's no different than like when Rohini said, well, Dicken, talk about whatever you want. And I say, well, is there anything, what do you think would be helpful? You've called this meeting to order. What do you think would be helpful? And as soon as she started talking, I just listened. At a certain point, I go, oh, okay. And something occurred to me to say. That's what I do when I'm with people. That's always the entranceway from the psychological into the spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
Because the spiritual for me is no, I don't even have a word. I don't need it. It's not. It's just I go more and more beyond my own personal thinking,
Mm-hmm.
where I always find connection. And then when I'm in that space, things occur to me to say, and they come from that deeper place. So they're leading me toward kindness, toward understanding, toward
Mm-hmm.
caring, toward sharing from the heart.
Mm.
And so I talk a bit and then see how that helps somebody. See if that's helpful.
Wow.
And what I find is if I get interested, if I'm talking from that place and if I'm doing the best I can to point people toward that place within themselves, at a certain point, people get quieter. Now they're going from their personal thinking into this quiet, reflective state. That's going from the psychological toward the spiritual. Why is it called the spiritual? Well, when you touch that space, it awakens love and understanding for free. No strings attached. And then people begin to recognize what it means to look in that direction, what the mystics have said, look within, it's not really within, it's just beyond the limitations of your concepts. That's what within means. Because then when you go beyond concepts, there is no inside and outside and this and that. It's just what is, what's here when concepts aren't. Pure
I guess
thought.
when you are in that state, you feel really, really good too.
Yes. And then you begin to see how ordinary it is and how available it is to you. And then people say, I don't need to talk to you. And I say, great. Fabulous. Fabulous. You know where to look. Next time you feel stressed, unhappy, uncertain, confused, ambivalent, next time you're in a horrific situation, when you fall out of your personal thinking into the now, fall beyond the limitations of thinking into thought, the power of thought, pure consciousness, free of the contamination of ideas and concepts. That's where you'll find, that's what Sid said is the ultimate answer. He says it's so practical, as Rohini was saying. That's where every human being finds exactly what they're looking for. Whatever is most helpful to you in that moment.
Yeah.
Right?
Thank you, Dicken.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thanks,
That's
Angus.
a beautiful question.
Yeah, this has been really wonderful conversation, Dicken. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome, Rohini.
Do you have any upcoming programs or anything else that you'd like to share with people on the call?
Oh, actually, I'm doing something on the other coast of the U.S. in Vermont coming up. Oh, that's the wrong calendar. Let me just check the dates. If anybody's interested, they can email me, but it's also on my website. Not October. Let's try. Here it is. August 11th, 12th, and 13th. 2-day public seminar and then an extra day for practitioners. It's the third year I've done that, and it's always been a hoot. It's a very relaxed, open kind of weekend retreat.
Lovely. And your website is 3principlesmentoring.com?
Yes, and I post coming events on there, so people can look.
Yeah, thank you, Dicken. Beautiful conversation, and very grateful to have you kicking us off in October in Santa Monica.
I can't wait to be with you and Angus and the whole host of folks that come to that.
Thank you. And this recording will be posted on the Facebook group, and also it's shared on my blog. So if anybody didn't get the whole thing or wants to share it with a friend, just, it'll be available.